Good morning. We're going to get started. Today is Thursday, August 10, 2017. Thank you for joining us for the 9 o'clock TDC meeting. We could call the meeting to order, and at this time, if you could join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Next, I call approval for the minutes of July 20th, 2017.
Moved.
Second. Any comments? No comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
At this time, we'll go to public to be heard. And first, before anybody else hasn't come forward, if I could have Eileen Saffron come forward. She's in the room. She has an announcement to make, and we have some special gifts here on our table. She has exciting news. If you weren't able to attend the event or know about it, she's happy to fill us in real quick.
Mayor asked me to make sure everybody on the TDC Council got a copy of the new Fort Myers City of Palms, a contemporary portrait book. If you open it up, you'll know a lot of people in this room are in it, a lot of the businesses are in it, a lot of the places that are near and dear to you are in it. He can't be here today. He's in an economic summit with his staff. I just wanted you to know that the contemporary book is not just about Fort Myers, but where people who come to Fort Myers enjoy and places that they visit. And also, right now, we're on the cusp of new development, so the mayor thought that it was a good time to spend this past year photographing the city. And also, Amy Bennett-Williams wrote the captions under all the pictures, so she had to write about the city in this book. And basically, you're going to start seeing the next wave of development. So before it got all torn up again, we have this time capsule of our Fort Myers, the city, and it's the first modern book about our city. So everybody look through it, and I would say about half this room is in it. So thank you.
Great, thank you, and thank you for dropping that by and giving us the good news. Thank you. Next speaker, public comment.
Edison Ford Winter Estates has it for sale. It's the first place that you can buy it. So if you like the book, they're going to have books on it. So you want to say a few words?
Good morning, TDC Council. I'm here for two reasons. First, to tell you that we are the only place that you could buy the book, and we will be having two presentations and book signings with the mayor, Eileen, and Amy Bennett-Williams, August 24th and September 12th. So I hope you all, if you want your book signed, come out to the Edison Ford Winter Estates. Also, I want to thank you. Today you're going to be approving the grants, and I would like to thank you for all your support, your previous support, and your support in the future. We changed things up a little bit. We're going to do a lot more digital advertising and some website design, so I hope that everything is satisfactory. And again, thank you very much for your support.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Any other speakers at this time for public to be heard? Okay, we'll close public comment. I just want to say thank you. I was able to watch the meeting last month. Renee, thank you. Good job. I wasn't able to be here. I was traveling for work, and thank you for holding the meeting. It was a good job. And I did hear some of the concerns we had about the reserves, and I just wanted to know that we are currently aware of the reserve balances for the TDC, and that there's currently no criteria for saying the reserve balance for that, but we will be meeting. I already talked to staff, county management about that. We will be meeting and be having an upcoming workshop on that. So we'll be talking about discussing how that money can be used and what the criteria will be for that in the future workshops.
Thank you.
Okay. And at this time, we'll go to the municipalities to be heard. Any municipality would like to be heard? Okay. And special presentations. We have a presentation. Lydia Black is here. The Alliance of the Arts, please come forward. Thank you.
So good. Thank you so much. My name is Lydia Black, and I'm the Executive Director and CEO of the Alliance for the Arts, and it is an absolute pleasure to be here, particularly on the day that you'll be approving Arts and Attractions funds. I have the distinct pleasure of not only working with the Alliance for the Arts, but be an advocate for the entire arts community. And I'm excited to share with you some new news about the economic impact of our nonprofit arts and cultural community here in Lee County. In 2010, remember that lovely economic year? Remember that year? That was great, right? Baseball revenue down, hotel revenue down, entertainment down, real estate down. Well, that was the last year we did this. So 2010, we have some great baseline numbers. 2015, about 5 years later, we decided to run the report again. We're excited to say we are part of all 50 states who did some arts and cultural think tank work. We not only collected economic impact numbers, we talked about how the arts can be drivers to cultural tourism. We talked about how the arts can drive workforce, how the arts can drive the next generation of leaders and public servants and volunteers like yourself. So we were very, very proud that Lee County was represented and the city of Fort Myers as well. What we learned very quickly, we had over 1 million individual surveys across the country that were collected in the nonprofit arts and cultural community. And it was very clear that there's a variety of support for those who are looking for funding in arts and culture, for those who are looking for economic activity and things to do, quality of life. We learned 63% of Americans believe that the arts lift us up. 73% the arts are positive experiences in a troubled world. That 64% that they experience pleasure when they participate in the arts. We learned at a national level, all 50 states participated. So we always think it's interesting to share with our county officials and our public servants about why the arts are important. We know about them as entertainers. We know about them as what they provide for education. And what we don't know as much is what is their economic activity? How many people do they employ? How do they drive tours them? And how do they provide a second layer of education to our youth? And so what we learned across the country is that there's $166 billion of annual economic activity. That's a huge, significant part of the GDP of the United States. And this is only the nonprofit sector. It doesn't include major filmmakers. It doesn't include any for-profit entities locally here like Broadway Palm or the Barbara B. Mann Center. This only incorporates groups like Big Arts, Bonita Springs Center for the Arts, Edison Ford Winter Estates, Art Fest Fort Myers, The Alliance, Florida Rep, Sidney Byrne Davis Art Center. So those groups that have the C3 category for their tax numbers. We learned that across the country, full-time equivalent jobs were about 4.6 million. Resident household income was over $96 billion, which is insane for me. Total government revenue, money going back into state and local federal coffers, was about $27 billion. So we looked at these national numbers, and here locally, we participated with all of our nonprofit arts partners to figure out how does this affect Lee County? What part of these numbers are carved out here in Lee County alone? So we looked locally. What we learned in 2015 that the arts community provided 140 million annual economic impact into our county. They created over almost 4,000 full-time equivalent jobs. They created about $89 million in resident household income and about $7.6 million in local government revenue and another $11 million in state and local coffers. In 2010, we were about at 68 million. So we've seen a significant increase from those baseline numbers in 2010. We shared data graphs. Actually, we have those in the full report if you'd like to look at those. But what we saw in about 2012, after 2010, our arts, we all dipped. We saw a dip. In about the end of 2012, 2013, the arts community saw a significant jump. So in less than 2 years in a terrible economy, the arts proved relatively resilient to the economic bump and bubble. And so we're seeing almost a doubling growth of economic activity, again, here in just Lee County, which is actually surprised me as I was going through some of these numbers. So to break this down, what we see is that in that 140 million of annual economic activities are two different sources, organizational spending and event-related spending. So organization and audience spending. So we took over 1,000 surveys from all of our arts partners across Lee County. So you might have come to an event. You might have gone to the Gulf Coast Symphony or the Southwest Florida Symphony at Barbara B. Mann. You might have seen one of our volunteers say, "Hello, would you take 2 minutes to give us some information about your experience here?" Which we asked, where's your zip code? So we learned how many folks are out-of-county residents. We learned how much they're spending on meals pre-show, how much they're spending on drinks potentially post-show. Are they spending a babysitter? Did they buy new shoes to come to an event? So that's part of that audience spending. The others is that our organizations here in the county who contribute $34 million back in are the folks like Florida Rep who are buying lumber to build sets, and folks like ArtFest that are buying tents and spending locally in vendor dollars here, folks like the Alliance who repatch walls every 7 minutes, it seems, and provides an enormous amount of, and those aren't kids punching holes through the walls. We just finished serving summer camp, which are 90 students a week in one program, which is great. We're excited for some quiet right now. But so we see this $1.4 million of annual economic activity broken down between audience expenditure and organizational expenditure. And our goal within the arts community is continuing to grow that because that puts more dollars to be able to provide additional economic activity and incentives here in our county. What we saw again in Lee County is almost 4,000 jobs created. Can you imagine if all of our nonprofit arts communities, all those folks that serve in galleries and theater and music and dance, were eliminated in culture? We would lose almost 4,000 jobs in our county. We're excited again to see this number rise. In 2010, there were 2,000 full-time equivalent employees. At the Alliance, we have about 8 full-time employees, 35 individual contractors, and employee bookkeepers and accountants. And I think what happens in workforce is when we present these numbers, people forget that our nonprofit arts community and our nonprofit and social service community, whether it's health and education, they think we're kind of run on volunteers. They don't recognize that it takes paid, qualified employees to be able to provide the type of programming and enhanced services to our community. So I think this is a really important number as we move forward, both in the arts community to be able to figure out how do we continue to increase this, but to see that there is increase year over year. We also see that $18 million, which is a combination of both local and state revenues. We're not getting these dollars. These dollars are generated because of the program we have. So whether it's a festival where the River District Alliance is hosting Art Walk, don't make that mistake. They'll all yell at me afterwards. Music Walk, Art Walk, whether it's Art Fest, whether it's Bonita Springs for bringing in 2 Brazilian acoustic guitars, what are people doing who are going to the event? This doesn't include your ticket sales. This says, hey, I got season tickets to the Florida Rep. I'm going to go eat at Twisted Vine. I might get a drink at the ballroom and listen to some music afterwards. I might shop at the Franklin shops. So we're seeing about $18 million in economic revenue going back into our state and local coffers, which we think is impressive, and again, almost a double increase from our baseline numbers, which now aren't apples to apples, and I can talk about that, and the report talks about that as well, but just for the basis, to show that there is growth within the economic impact of our arts community. We also saw that attendees to these events, so when we accosted you going into an event and you gave us 2 to 3 minutes, we asked you where you were spending your dollars. We found that folks spend on average about $31 per event. And these are both local residents and tourists alike. No, you cannot get a hotel room for $2.50. It's an average, right? So we saw that our attendees were spending, meals and snacks are the highest proportion of where our arts patrons are spending dollars, but we also saw clothing, lodging, transportation, and souvenir gifts. I know the TDC is very interested in how we're going to continue to serve increased number of visitors, how we're going to increase, I know the hoteliers want to see more lodging, they want to see those dollars go up, but we have seen almost a $10 per person per event rise since 2010. The breakdown of local and non-local, I think this is really important both for our arts community and for the TDC and our public officials, is right now, based on this survey and the 1,000-plus audience intercept surveys, we're seeing that the arts community serves about 75% local residents. So that's local, Lee County, and touching counties. This survey made sure that the touching counties, since they're so close, aren't considered non-local, which is more based on what the TDC requires as the 5-district area. So we're looking at about 25% non-locals. And I know that our arts community is going to rely and work with you guys to figure out how do we enhance the visitor experience? How do we make this piece of the pie larger? Things like the arts and attraction grants, continuing to fund those at higher levels will help us serve this community better, this red part, grow that so that we see more additional increased local revenue going into our local and state coffers. And I do believe that the arts and attraction grants is a really significant component, and funding the arts community at a level that's equal to the dollars that are coming back in is a really important discussion that we need to have as we move forward. We see the difference between the local and non-local expenditures. $47 non-local, of course we want to see more of those dollars. Of course we want to see more people staying in hotels spending dollars here, where local is spending about $26. Let's see. I want to show you a little pop-out study. 2010, we did not do this, but at the mayor's request and council's request, we popped out the city of Fort Myers. It is one of the few cities in our county that has a direct line item for arts and culture. And so we thought it was interesting that it has a pretty significant economic activity within the county, and wanted to share that with you. About $50 million in annual activity just from the organizations that have a footprint in the city of Fort Myers. So organizations like the Southwest Florida Symphony that might do concerts at Simeon Byrne Davis Art Center are not included in this study because they're not physically located in the city. So we think that there's a more significant impact, but are pretty proud to see that there's over 1,300 jobs. So that's Sidney Byrne Davis Art Center, Laboratory Theater, Theater Conspiracy, The Alliance, Art Fest, and many others who, if you are here today and I haven't said your name, I apologize. And so you can see the breakdown of the city of Fort Myers as well. Again, it's easy to talk about the socioeconomic value for me. I have a hard time saying, listen, we want to see support. We want to see our community rally around the arts. We want to see you go to music. We want to see you go to dance. We want to have our arts organizations participate in schools with activities that will really enhance the academic experience of our young people. We see that folks who participate in the arts are more creative, out-of-the-box thinkers. We see that we're struggling with some of our corporate partners here that are seeing turnover year after year of their staff, and one of their biggest complaints is there's not enough arts and cultural activities here. So how do we make sure that if Americans and Lee County folks believe that the arts and culture should be a significant component of economic development, of social services, of education, how we work with the TDC, how we work with our arts partners to continue to grow that. And I think these numbers give us a really good baseline and a really good growth potential to show more investment in the arts is more dollars back into the county. And it's not just that warm and fuzzy that we see, and we can talk about. I could talk to you about why I love the arts and why music is so important and why dance is so important. But we feel it's really important, and on behalf of the arts community, we're really excited to be able to present these numbers to you. And these are all of the nonprofit arts organizations who participated in this study in 2015. We're very grateful for their service and the work that they do in our community, and I'm proud to call them all partners. We also wanted to say a special thanks to the TDC and the beaches of Fort Myers and Sanibel, City of Fort Myers, the Community Foundation, and the Florida Division of Cultural Affairs, who also provided funding. You all know, you do economic impact studies, you do bed tax studies all the time. These are not cheap. So all of our partners and all of our funding partners are really important. And also, so that you know that I'm not going rogue here and calculating little numbers in my basement. No, there's no basements in Florida. These are the people that have acknowledged that this study. We just sent these to Washington, and I got to do a videotaping to send to both to Tallahassee and Washington as part of our national presentation to represent this coast of Florida. And it's really interesting to see how the Mayor's Conference, how the destinations are really embracing the arts in different communities across the country. We have a little ways to go, but we're seeing more emphasis here locally on being able to show these economic impact numbers and the social impact that our arts community have. So if you don't believe me, you can go talk to these guys about our study results. Again, I tried to cram a lot in there. We gave you a copy of the full study on our website at artandlee.org/impact. We have a breakdown of numbers. We have executive summaries. We have one-page summaries. We have pop-outs of the city of Fort Myers, and we have a variety of articles from Florida Weekly News Press to National to The Hill in D.C. that you can look at that help digest in other ways to say, how are local commissions, VCBs, working with the arts community to enhance the visitor's experience as well as enhance our local residents? So our call to action and our hope for you is that you continue to fund and continue to think about raising and increasing that arts and attraction line because it is a return on investment. About every $1 spent in the arts at the county level has a $12 investment back into our coffers. So we ask you to continue to call upon arts leaders when you're talking about economic development, when we're talking about redefining communities, whether it's here in the city of Fort Myers or across the county. How do we become engaged in transportation issues? If we have funding dollars for shelters, for buses, why not engage an artist to become a part of that? And when we're talking about new boundaries for economic development and housing and midtown plans in the city, how do we make sure that the arts are a component of that? And I think that's one way that we can really address and work together to make sure that our arts community is providing the resources that you need, and the arts community can continue to be a valuable asset as we grow our community. So thank you for my 10 minutes. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take those from you.
Any questions for Lydia? Great, thank you for the presentation. Sorry, Colleen? Go ahead.
Just, what's in the government revenue? Like what makes up that number on your slide?
So we have in the government revenue, what they do is the whole presentation I have in the back of those studies, so I can point that out to you. But in basically a nutshell, when we look at that audience expenditures, and we did our organizational surveys, and what I didn't get into is how each organization, they hated me. I had to convince them. It took about an hour and a half for the organizations to go through their 990s. So what we looked at, and why we only work with the nonprofit arts community, is because it's public disclosure. So we can pull 990s and financial P&L balance sheets through those. And what we look at is expenditures locally, tax revenue that come in from what we're spending, right? So if my budget's $1 million, our budget is $1.2 million, where are we spending those dollars? So we look at staffing, we look at capital improvements, we look at program development, we look at taxes related to those at state and local levels, and then there's formulas that they use to calculate the impact as our audiences are spending locally and how that dollar gets reinvested within the community.
And then my second.
I hope that answered, that's kind of the...
I just was curious, and then so you did 1,000 surveys, plus then so how did you figure out the local versus non-local? Is that because you went back to the organizations individually as well?
We did 2 surveys. So we had 1,000 audience intercept surveys, and I think we had, this number is going to be off maybe by 10, but I think we had 52 nonprofit participants.
Okay.
So those nonprofit participants went through a 28-page survey that calculated how they're spending their budgets, where they're spending, and it was based on 2015 990s. And then the audience expenditures, that survey that the audience were giving calculated, or the first 5 questions were based on residency. So we have an issue with snowbirds, so we were able to adapt the survey this year to identify you have to live in a place for over 6 months. Where do you claim the homestead exemption, right? So they made those things clear so we could identify from the audiences the 15, 7, or the difference between local and non-local by zip code.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Great. Thank you for your information and great job.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Nicely done.
Next, the report of the Executive Director, Cameron.
Okay. Get the slides pulled up here. All right, so bed tax for June was up 3.2% over the previous June. And when we look at year-to-date, we're still lagging just a tiny bit, down 0.23% actually. About $77,000 we're lagging. As you know, we had a rough beginning to the calendar year, and we've just about made that up. I'm pretty confident when we get July in, we'll have made that up. But STAR report for June, occupancy up 0.5%, ADR up 1.3%, and RevPAR up 1.8%. Passenger traffic at the airport, they had a fantastic June, up 7.3%. And for the year, they were up 2%. So good news, lots of folks traveling through the airport. Take a few look at the key indicators for the month and the year to date. So you see here, inquiries up 40% for the month, and for the year we're up 64%. Leads up 123%, and for the fiscal year 49%. Partner referrals down 4.4% for the month, but year to date up 6.6%. Our impressions to goal were at 95% of our goal, so clearly we will exceed that with 3 months remaining in terms of impressions. We have already significantly exceeded, nearly doubled our inquiry goal with 3 months remaining. Leads we've exceeded our goal at this point. And of course our budget, we're 65% spent to this point. Little underspent, but that's pretty typical as most of those invoices come in the last few months of the year. All right, that is that. Now I would like to ask Nicole to come up from Davidson Peterson and Associates and present to you. Yes, sir.
Is there any particular chart that you have starting from October through June to kind of talk about each how the month performed, to kind of give us an indication of we were down 3%, 4%, 5%. Now we're back up to almost even. Is there any cumulative chart that I can look at or see or have?
Yes, on the dashboard, we actually show it that way. We show previous year and the current year so you can see. But which particular indicator?
Just trying to look at
Sure.
the months and when we're off. And, it's taken us till July
Yep.
to catch up. And just curious how big of a hole it was, how much we were down, just to look at it again.
Sure. And
I remember.
absolutely. Happy to share that with you. I mean, the bulk of the hit to bed tax revenue was January.
Right.
I think we were down about 10% in January, down a little bit in February, and some in March, which would be expected because Easter was later. We had a significant increase in April, as you would expect, although it was more significant than I anticipated. I do think a later Easter compresses season a bit, so that also explains a little bit of January's deficit, but the balance of the year has been pretty good, but happy to share that information with you.
Obviously, inside my community, people are talking about being down in double digits and just trying to understand some baseline to obviously have a
Correct.
conversation
And
to talk about some of the issues. There's a multitude of reasons. I do believe the economy is really the biggest one. I don't know there's many things we do, but I've heard many excuses. So just really trying to have more factual information.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about it here, as you can guess, over those months. If you look on page 15 in your packet, you will see the bed tax report by month, and so you can see, the comparison.
I have the iPad here, so is
We'll send you the packet.
Great, that's-
Absolutely, afterwards, yes.
Great.
So just so you know, it is in there.
I appreciate that. Very helpful.
Super.
Thanks.
All right, if you're okay with that, are there any other questions? And I apologize, I should have asked that question before I asked Nicole to come up. Nicole, would you please come up and share with us the second quarter research report?
Thank you, Tam.
Welcome back, Nicole.
Yeah, it's great to be here. It's been 8 years since I've been here to talk about this data, so happy to be back in Fort Myers. Today, going to go over the results for the second quarter of 2017. So this covers April, May, and June, and is kind of a synthesis of the research, the different survey pieces that we do for you, including a visitor profile and surveys we do with the lodging managers, and also with residents on visitors that are coming to stay with them. So just an overview of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you just some brief highlights of the season, of the April, May, June spring season, looking also at some calendar year to date, so that'll cover January through June, a brief lodging industry summary, and then some key points on visitor satisfaction, some of the indicators there, and then the outlook for the third quarter based on what lodging managers told us when we interviewed them. So first, look at your spring season, and it definitely, from our numbers, looks better than what the first quarter of 2017 looked at. Visitation among your paid accommodations guests at 853,000 and change, up 4% over the same time period last year. Total expenditures, again, among these paid accommodations guests, up at $500 million for that 3-month period, up 7% over last year. When you look specifically at what they spent just on lodging, that was $175 million, also up 7% over last spring. Available room nights, kind of not a huge increase, but up 1.4% to 1.9 million. Occupied room nights at almost 1.2 million, up a little more than the available room nights, and this results here in our average occupancy rate just up a tad, but it's not down, which is great. Going from 61.4% last year during the spring to 61.7% this year, a 0.5% percentage increase over the year. ADR, on the other hand, your average daily rate, with quite a significant increase over last spring, 5.1% increase. It had been about $142 last spring, up to almost $150 this spring. And a lot of this, when we look at the individual months, we saw a lot of this in April. And then May and June were kind of pretty stable with last year, but April seemed to see that big push in ADR in comparison to last year. As a result, with occupancy up a little bit, ADR up quite a bit, RevPAR was also up 5.6% year over year. So when we look at visitation over the last 5 years, down at the bottom here, we've put the dates for the Easter holiday, just so you can see how that times up. But your visitation among those staying in paid accommodations, you've seen continual growth the last 2 years. There was a little dip for both total visitation and paid accommodations visitation back between 2014 and 2015, but since then we've seen, a constant increase. And over the past 5 years, when you take 2013 to 2017 altogether, you have a 1.5% increase in total visitation and a 16.2% increase in your paid accommodations visitation, which is a tremendous amount of growth over a 5-year period. And looking at the spending, that has also been on the rise the past 5 years. We saw a little bit of a dip between 2015 and 2016, but if you look at these numbers, not huge. So again, your 5-year change, 9% in your total expenditures, and when you look at just those paid accommodations again, it's huge, a 23.6% increase in 5 years. Now looking at the visitor origin, and this is just those guests that are staying in paid accommodations, 79% of them being domestic visitors here from the United States, 21% coming from international areas. Canada and Germany bringing in the highest percentage during this spring season, each at 7%, the UK at 2%, and then other countries making up the last 4%. What we do see, and we saw this also in wintertime, there's a little bit of a year-over-year increase in the proportion coming from Canada, and then a subsequent decrease in the proportions coming from Germany and the UK. And then as far as your domestic visitors, almost half of them, 46% coming from the Midwest, 25% then coming each from the Northeast and from the South, including in-state visitors. Your top domestic feeder markets, you can see on the right-hand side, Chicago and Boston being the top ones for the spring season, New York, Indianapolis, Cleveland, Miami coming in, not far behind. So next we're going to look at all these same data points, but we're going to look at the calendar year. So this is going to combine the winter season and the spring season. So we're looking here January through June 2017, and we're going to also compare it to the same time period last year. So again, visitation for the first 6 months of the year, almost 1.6 million among paid accommodations, up 2.5% over last year at the same time. Expenditures, $1.35 billion for the first 6 months of the year. Again, just among your paid accommodations guests, and that's up just about 2% over January through June of 2016. Available room nights and occupied room nights both up about 2.3%. Occupancy completely flat. The exact same occupancy rate this came out to as last year, which again you have to take into account. We just saw a little bit of an increase here in the spring season, but winter we had seen a little bit of a drop. So it kind of evens out for the January to June period. Likewise, your ADR and your RevPAR, we just saw that large increase for the spring season, but back for the winter season there had been a bit of a drop there. So that kind of averages out. This a 1.1% drop, which statistically we kind of like to say it's pretty flat, because it kind of could go either way when it's not like minus 5% or minus 4%. So that's your year-to-date results on those. And then looking at visitation, total visitation is just a tad bit lower than it was 5 years ago. It is up over last year. So we look at the 5-year change, it's about 2% less. But when we're looking at our paid accommodations visitation, that is up quite significantly, 7.8% over the last 5 years. Expenditures for the first half of the year continue to show this rising trend, and especially, again, we see that large increase in expenditures among your paid accommodations guests, 18% over the last 5 years, and then a 9.5% increase in total expenditures over the last 5 years. And then visitor origin. This looks very similar to what we just saw for the spring season. 81% of your visitors in the first half of the year coming from the United States, 19% internationally. Canada, showing when we're looking at January through June, the clear leader there at 10% of your visitors. Germany coming in next at 5%. Again, we see that same trend we saw in the winter, and I had just mentioned in the spring. It looks like higher proportions from Canada, slightly lower proportions from Germany and the UK. And then looking at your domestic market, again, the Midwest, half of your visitors for the first half of the year, your domestic visitors, that is, coming from the Midwest. The Northeast next at 28%, and then 19% from the South. Your top feeder markets, coming in at the top, we have Chicago again, as we saw in the spring season, and then Boston as well. Followed very closely by Minneapolis and New York, Indianapolis. So next we're going to look at the lodging industry summary, and this whole portion comes from the interviews that we do with the lodging property managers here in Lee County. So we're looking here at occupied room nights, available room nights. You can see here your available room nights, that's the blue bars across the top. Seems to have fluctuated a bit, and it changes. It's kind of always in flux, but some of this is subject to just interviewing too, and which properties participate and how many properties participate. But we do see growth. You've seen growth between 2016 and 2017 for both the spring season and the calendar year to date. Occupied room nights have increased substantially. That has continued to grow over the last 5 years. Then we're looking at the average occupancy rate. As we mentioned earlier, a slight increase this spring season year over year, up to 61.7%. Relatively even, but has shown 8.2% growth over the last 5 years. Back in 2013 was coming in at 57%. Calendar year, it's very even with last year exactly, but showing a 5.7% increase over the last 5 years. Now this breaks it down by property type, and what we see here is, this increase, a slight increase we saw in occupancy rate was pretty even across the board, with your condos and vacation homes and your RV parks and campgrounds showing a little more of an increase in occupancy rate than your hotel, motel, resort category. Hotels and motels coming in about 1% higher than last year, and then the other two categories, condos, vacation homes, and your RV parks and campgrounds, showing about a 3% increase year over year. Average daily rate, as we talked about, showed a large increase this year, spring season and year to date. Over the last 5 years has shown significant growth. You see these arrows at the bottom here, 19.5% growth in spring season ADRs over the last 5 years, and 17.2% for the calendar year. And looking at it again by property types, we do see a big difference here in the different properties, with your hotel, motel, resort category showing a healthy increase of 5% ADR year over year. Your condos and vacation homes showing a 10% increase in their average daily rate when looking at the spring season this year compared to the spring season last year. RV parks and campgrounds about even with the hotel, motel, resorts, just under 5%. And then RevPAR, following from that, we see large increases over the last 5 years, 29.3% when we're looking at the spring season over the last 5 years. That RevPAR has gone up from $71.45 in 2013 up to $92.37 in 2017. Calendar year to date has also shown a huge increase at 23.9%. Again, we see in the spring season, if you're just looking at 2016 and 2017, that's gone up a fair amount. When you're looking at calendar year to date, there's just a slight drop due to those drops we saw during the winter season. And then looking at it by property type, we see the same relationship we saw a few slides back with the average daily rate. Your condos and vacation homes showing the largest increase in revenue since they had that largest increase in ADR at 13.3% increase between 2016 and 2017. RV parks and campgrounds a little less, but still a very significant growth at 7.8%, and hotels and motels resorts at 6% increase. So next we're going to look at visitor satisfaction, which I'm sure you guys may remember is continues to be glowing. Everyone seems very happy once they're here and happy that they were here. Just the basic on the top left here, satisfaction with their visit. 93% of the visitors that we spoke to said they were satisfied with their visit, either very or satisfied. 56% saying they were very satisfied. This number continues to be high, has always been high, and as evidenced by, I think it's 71% of your visitors are repeat visitors, so they're happy, they keep coming back, they keep spending their money here year after year. We do ask the paid accommodations guests to rate the quality of the accommodations they stayed in, and basically we're asking them on the framework of, did it meet your expectations, did it exceed your expectations, and 94% said their expectations were at least met, with 39% saying that their expectations were far exceeded with their accommodations. And importantly, down at the bottom right, this is the one that we like to see. We asked them whether they're going to recommend Lee County as a destination to their friends or family. 90% of these visitors said that they will. And that continues to be high. But interestingly, this year, when we're looking at the spring season as compared to last year, this was statistically significant this year that it was higher. Last year it was 84%, this year 90%. So more of your visitors this year said they were likely to recommend it. And likewise, more of them said they were likely to return to Lee County, 90% of the visitors this year, which is huge. And then we go further to ask these people who say they're likely to return. We say, well, when are you coming back? Are you going to come back next year or 10 years from now? And over half of those, 57%, said that they will be back within the next 12 months. So they're coming back soon. On the left, we have a little box here. We always ask them, we give them this long list of potentially negative things about their trip and what were your least liked features. And we just put here the top 3. These change with season. Weather becomes an issue at certain times. Traffic is always up there at the top, and here it's no different. 22% saying that that was their main concern. Insects coming in next at 17%, and beach seaweed came in. We have a box around that. It was statistically significant as compared to last spring. It doesn't seem to be a trended issue. We're not seeing it a lot, but it's certainly something, we'll see how that goes next season as well. And next we're going to look at the outlook for the third quarter. And this is a series of questions we asked the lodging property managers at the end of the survey. And we basically say, okay, we're talking for this season, we're interviewing them in early July. And we're asking them to report on April, May, June. And we're saying, okay, well now we want you to think about July, August, and September. How do your reservations compare right now to what they were last year at this time? Are they up? Are they the same? Are they down? And then we ask them to go a little further out. What we're showing you here is just that first quarter. So you see that on the far right. This is the most recent results. Now, the projections for the summer season, they're not as positive as we've seen in prior years. If you look back to 2013, 2014, you had 76%, 88% saying that, their reservations for the next 3 months were either up or they were the same. This has gone down, and we saw this during the winter season. We saw this during the fall season. Now, it's always interesting to go back in time afterwards and see, well, how did that really compare with what the results showed for that month? And when we look at fall, and they were talking about winter, they were kind of pessimistic about it. Winter turned out to be not that great, so it kind of lined up. Now winter, they were telling us the same thing. They were a little more positive, not as much, but spring turned out to be okay. So it's hard to tell, what does this going to mean for the summer season. One thing we did notice this spring season is we talk about that planning window and when they decide to go to a destination, when they start thinking about it, and then when they finally book their reservations. And this spring season, we had a higher proportion of our visitors that said they booked their lodging less than 2 months before they were coming here, and a lot that said less than 1 month. So these are the people that, when we're asking this question and this outlook, these lodging managers, they don't have those people booked yet because they haven't. They were going to come in June. They might not have booked till the middle of May. So this was the first season where we saw that, actually condensed. So it'll be interesting to see what pops up in the summertime. But this was their outlook.
Nicole, just to add,
yes,
they tend to be more pessimistic than the results.
Than the results, right.
Historically.
Yeah. And it's early, too. When we're talking them the first week in July, the second week in July, and we're asking them about that whole time period. There's still a lot that's going to happen in the next few months. So that is all I have for today. If there are any questions?
Any questions for Nicole?
No? Well, thank you.
Next, we have the Nancy's up next. Attractions marketing funding requests.
Good morning. I am here this morning to ask the TDC to formalize attractions marketing funding. The total budgeted for this next year is $400,000, and there's 2 agencies that have requested this funding. The first is the Southwest Florida Community Foundation, who administers the attraction marketing program for us. $350,000 is going to be allocated. Right now, there's 42 organizations who have requested funding, and we're still in the middle of review. Ashley Skalecki is here from the Community Foundation if you have questions, but I know Pam chairs that committee. Did you have anything you wanted to share with the TDC?
I just want to say the change was good. I think I've been on this committee the whole 13 years that it's been here, and we've gotten to where we know a lot of the organizations. And first of all, having 42 applicants was amazing. That was a really positive thing. Staff, Nancy L.A. and Brian did a great job with their notes and recommendations to us. It was extremely helpful to have some insight from those things. And I think the changes to the committee were excellent. Renee and Colleen are such great stewards of the money and just such great pencil pushers, and they really, have helped us guide through that. So all in all, I think it was an excellent change. I'm sorry that we didn't get all the work done in the first meeting, but it was a marathon session. In the past, since we have all been so familiar with the organizations, and it has basically been the same organizations re-upping, it was a real learning curve. So I think we got through 17 of the applications in 2.5 hours or 3 hours, something like that. And so we're going to have another meeting and continue on. But I'm really, really very happy with the committee and the changes and the way everyone really spent a lot of time in advance of the meeting working and trying to be careful with expenditures. Thank you.
So as you have in the past, the request would be for you to approve the $350,000, and then we will bring back the final list of recommendations to you in the future. The second request from the $400,000 is for the Edison Ford Winter Estates annual marketing plan. Lisa Sabatoni is here if you have questions, but they've done a great job of enhancing their request for us at our request this year. So we appreciate all the agencies that have applied for funding. They really are going to work hard this year because we've implemented some measurements to show you your return on investment. So,
Nancy, if I could, Rob had a question.
Can you refresh my memory on the $400,000? Is that, I'm assuming it's going up each year. Is there some percentage of the overall budget that this turns out to be? Where do we get the $400 from?
it comes from, Tam, you want to elaborate?
Sure. The $400,000 is part of the budget we presented to you when we gave you the proposed budget. This was an increase of $25,000, am I right? $50,000 increase, I apologize, over the previous year. We have been trying to grow it because we have so much demand for those funds, and we think it's important that we share that with as many agencies as possible. So it is an increase. It is not a set percentage of the budget, but it comes from the marketing dollars, same funding source, the 53.6%.
I have one follow-up question to it. You had $853,000 in request and $350,000 to work with those requests. Was that a difficult task?
It's an ongoingly difficult task. But, honestly, when we looked at some of the requests, some of them didn't fall within the parameters. The maximum request was $25,000, and a few of the organizations missed that and requested more. So, no, I think that we should continue to look at after this year, and possibly go up a little bit next year if the funding, if all the funding is utilized and the organizations do what they say. I think it'll be a great program and worth considering increasing a little.
Thank you.
Follow-up question?
Everyone?
What do you think specifically you were short by, if you had to guess? I mean, if today we needed to,
We are literally halfway through. 150 of it is on 2 requests because they didn't follow it. So we're really at about 700,000 in requests for 350. Some of them don't. There's little pieces that don't qualify, and maybe because all of us were new to it except for Pam, literally, we dug into we're digging into everyone because we're taking our beach and shoreline events marketing hats into this, and you have to really look at it a little bit differently. I don't know what that number would look like.
Yeah.
But I think we're not trying to, right now we're not trying to get to that 350. Like, we're funding based on the ask. When the total's done, then we'll look at it. That might help dictate whether or not, do we want to play with these numbers anymore, or do we come back here? And I'm saying this for me. This was not a conversation in the room, so it's not fair. But right now, we're funding what we think are eligible, legitimate asks that are in the requests, and I think we're about actually half, right? We've spent half the money, and we're about halfway through. But that just, I don't know what's come. I don't know where we are in the pipeline in regards to what's ahead of us. So I don't know that we can answer that with intelligence.
Not yet, but we should be able to, after the process is complete, we'll be able to say, you know what, it might have been helpful to have an additional amount or not. I think we're at about 170 with the 17 that we've completed.
okay, thanks.
Okay.
What?
So we need a recommendation?
Anything else?
I have
Renee?
just a little bit of the history. Isn't the attractions funding one that almost dried up at one point? Was that? And this is a few years ago, and fortunately, life got breathed back into this. And I mean, we didn't have anybody even coming in for the money at one point, and now we've got 42 applications coming in.
Well, one of the things we added was the arts aspect. Originally, it was attractions. It was basically designed for small attractions, and we had like encouraging the arts community to become involved, and that was hugely successful. That was a really big.
And that's my point. It's great that we have these people coming forward, even though at the point we don't have the money right now. But we may have been a little more liberal, but we knew that we only had 350,000. So we were fairly strict when we were looking at these things. So as you say, maybe after we get finished and we'll see what comes in next year, we might want to adjust. So and then we'll come back into you with a recommendation.
Rob?
I'm confused on what we're moving to do. You say you're halfway finished with this process?
We're requesting the funding be allocated, the $350,000 and the $50,000 to the Edison home, and we'll live within those bounds, obviously this year, and then we may make the ask different next year, but that's what the request is at this point.
I would make that motion. If you're looking for a motion.
I'll second that. I just would love to understand what your shortfall is at some point in time. What do you think it is? Because obviously with the conversation I had last month, if you have $24 million in reserves and there's worthy candidates, maybe we've got to look at this a little differently.
It's an excellent point.
Any other comments? I had a motion second. All accept the request. All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Thank you, Nancy. Next, third quarter budget report. Lucy Maldonado. Anything new for this?
Good morning, everybody. Lucy Maldonado with the Visitor and Convention Bureau. I'm presenting this morning the third quarter budget report for your approval. Please let me know if you have any questions.
I'll move it.
Any motion, is second, any questions, comments? Nope. Okay, all in favor? Good? Thank you. Council information. Tamara, did you have one thing?
I do have one thing. The team here is going to be, we're really proud that we're going to host the SSL, the Superior Small Lodging Annual Conference and Industry Trade Show in October. There's a flyer at your spot in case you are interested in participating. We would be happy to include you. You will see that Visit Florida's CEO, Ken Lawson, will be a keynote speaker at that event. And if any of you are interested in going, definitely let Nancy know, and we'll make sure we get you a spot so you can come in and at least hear part of it. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to TDC member items. Pam, would you like to start off?
No, I don't have anything, but thank you.
Rena? Councilwoman? Thank you. Renee?
Well, whoever is responsible for the new screen and monitors and everything else, thank you. This is much better, but we
Yeah, it does.
I'll see
A
that.
little more detail, yeah.
And are you renting this space for?
Well done, yeah. We can actually
It's
see this
actually going to
a lot
get-
clearer, though, you know.
It's actually going to get even a little bit better. We're going to enlarge in these monitors as well, so, yeah.
Great. And
good.
just another reminder, Governor's Conference coming up the end of the month.
Great, thank you. Colleen?
Lee County Hotel Association luncheon is at the Crown. Do we remember? Is that
Hyatt.
Are we at the Hyatt? Okay, it is. I'll have to let you know.
the Hyatt.
But the reason that this lunch is important is this, we have been approached by FRLA, the Florida Restaurant Lodging Association, to kind of meld and merge with them. So if you have an opinion on that, you would want to, and you are a member of the Lee County Hotel Association, you would want to attend that lunch because we will be voting and seeking feedback that day. So that's very important.
You know the date?
I can't, you know what, I'm looking for.
I'm going to help you.
Thank you. And where is it?
24th,
It is at the Hyatt, and it's on the 24th.
August 24th.
Yes, thank you.
I don't have anything.
Kevin? Bob? Nothing for me. Wow, okay. Thank you. I don't have anything else other than say thank you for everything you do, and I look forward to working with our staff and getting some criteria set up for those reserves, and we'll talk more about that in the future, so thank you. Anything else? If not, we'll adjourn.
And we're going to take your picture.
Yes, that's right. We have a group
So
picture.
stay.
Yeah. Okay, meeting adjourned.
A group picture.
Whatever.
I made it 3:44. When you see all those requests and having gone through them, holy cow, like,